by saying congratulations on the film. I've had a chance to sit down and watch it, and I loved it, so congratulations.
Thank you. Oh, it's good to hear. Never gets old. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about where the idea came about for this film in the first place.
It was, I have to say, if I'm honest, that there was a motivation to make the film before I had any idea what it was going to be. I think a lot of filmmakers have a story of like, oh, I read this book and I knew it had to be a film. It wasn't anything like that. I knew I just wanted to make a film, and knew maybe some of the formal aspects I was interested in exploring, like, that it would have a certain comedy flavor, that maybe somewhat mildly experimental in its structure, but and it would be taken from experiences in real life, my life at the time. But beyond that, I didn't really know exactly, what form it was going to take. So it was a slow process of writing up little sketches with scenes based on people I knew from my life, and just seeing where those scenes developed, and then seeing what combinations of those scenes fit well together, until eventually I had something that looked like a script. It was much longer, actually, than something something that would ever work as a film. It was like 180 pages or something stupid. But yeah, then so it was like this building process, and then this gradual cutting process too, until it got to something that we thought, all right, this is ready to make.
It's always difficult to cut stuff out. I know for myself, when I've done screenwriting in the past, that it's always difficult to cut things out because you see why you need every scene. How did you go about cutting out and working out what you wanted to leave in there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was hard, and it was a funny process because there was too much in the script, even before we started shooting, and then after shooting there was too much there too. So we were kind of constantly cutting things. Sometimes I had to be dragged kicking and screaming to do it, and it always ended up, it's one of those things, that just, it's amazing how often just taking things out helps. And there was a huge extra section of the film that had been there from the very beginning at the writing stage, and had been easily the hardest part to shoot too, and then the hardest part to edit. And just because of how difficult it had been, and because I was editing the film too, and I knew I had that kind of bias as the writer and director, that I was just attached to it, I suppose, and it was very much the center of my thinking about what the film was. So it just didn't occur to me to take it out. We're moving it and trying to find the right place for it, and everywhere it was going, it was causing problems, and it was someone who wasn't connected to the project at all, who ended up suggesting that person was the only person from so many people who were closer to it who also knew how hard it had been and how much it had been part of the process of thinking about the film, that they just also didn't see that this was something that needed to go. But as soon as we took it out, the film was so much lighter. It was basically a dream sequence that comes at the end of the film, where the film ends now, so another 30-40 minutes after that was involving some characters that didn't actually have real life relationships with each other, but were then kind of recombined in the main character's head in the kind of dream sequence. But it was just, I liked it in theory, but it was just asking too much of audiences, and the film was better without it.
Is that 30-40 minutes something that you could use down the track, like for a short film or something like that?
Yeah, it's been discussed. I think I did really like it in itself. I think what I'm actually going to do is I have mixed feelings, because I mentioned it was really hard to shoot and edit, and part of that was because we were out in the bush. It was sort of national park stuff, and we had real gaps in the coverage, and also some difficulties from some of the non-professional actors who were there. So my gut feeling is that there's definitely something there, but I'll probably recast and reshoot it.
Yeah.
And have it as the maybe first half an hour in the next feature I do, and have it something continue on from what's there.
Yep.
That's what my thinking is at the moment, but we'll see.
Now, talking about casting, you mentioned that there was some non-professional actors in the film. First of all, tell us a little bit about the casting for the professional actors, because you said a lot of the characters were based on people that you knew. Did that make casting harder or easier?
I think it made it easier for the situations where the person I wrote the script for then was available and keen to play the role. That was really easy because there's almost no casting actually needed, even though we did do auditions almost just as a formality in those cases, just to really make sure that person was working. But in the instances where the person it was written for wasn't available to do it, that made casting really hard, because I guess the characters in the film, they're not that fleshed out psychologically. You know, their performances are quite flat, and characters' backgrounds and motivations are quite shallow in some ways. I think, yeah, it was just a different philosophy, I suppose, to how a lot of things get written for TV, and maybe how actors are like the kinds of roles actors are used to getting in theatre, where there's this psychological depth, and they're trying to load emotion and meaning and interpretation into every line. So I knew that the characters weren't necessarily going to gel with that kind of performance style, which you know, a lot of actors can tweak that, but I think when it's really chafing up against the way they've been taught, yeah, there's just like a tendency to overload some lines that that don't need it. So yeah, it didn't work with a lot of the actors we auditioned, but the ones that are in the film are the ones that intuitively just really got that they needed to pare it back massively, and that brought some mystery in, and brought brings the viewer in as a kind of investigator into working out characters, what's going on in their head, and the sort of riddle of that kind of thing. So Emma Diaz, one of the leads, is an actor who trained at Whopper, and she was just someone who, when she read, just instantly got it and never looked back with her. And yeah, she was probably the biggest character that was played by an actor, but there are a few.
Yeah. And what was it like working with non-professional actors as well? Some directors, I know, enjoy doing that, and some directors find it difficult. How did you find that process?
I really like it, mainly because I'm not a trained director. I'm not that comfortable with actors, just because I just don't feel like I speak their language.
Yeah.
If you're trained as a director, either at film school or, you know, in a sort of theatre context, you learn to speak the language of actors and learn to, I suppose, build characters with actors in a collaborative way, and I don't really have that experience. So sometimes I feel like with actors, I'm being asked for things that I just don't really know how to give, and whereas non-professionals, their heads are a little more uncluttered. Well, maybe more cluttered in some ways, but they're not bringing formal training, you know, to what they're doing. They're just kind of going with it. And I feel like the challenge with non-professionals is just about who you've picked, because what can work amazingly well with someone can be a total disaster with someone else, because they don't have often the skills to adjust on the go that an actor does. You know, to take direction and maybe change the way they're doing something. It's sort of, if you cast a non-actor wrong, it sort of can be game over, because they won't be able to just reinvent themselves and change it up. So it does put more pressure on the casting, but if you get that right, something I really enjoy, because it's just like, all right, we'll just see how this goes, and it's a sink or swim thing, and when it works and it's amazing just off the bat, without anyone feeling like anyone has to try too hard, that's really special. But it can also just be totally anxiety inducing if it's not working, because you don't have too many options.
Yep, yeah. We've seen some amazing experimental filmmakers in Australia over the years. People like Bill Masoulas, Jim Stamatakos. How important and how difficult was it for you to get that experimental feel of the film to work?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a interesting one. Like, I don't know that I saw the film as an experimental film, even though there's definitely some aspects of it that are different to. Maybe it's just like a difficulty with that word, because the word experimental often is associated with extreme formalist experimentation and techniques that are very obviously associated with capital E experimentalism. Whereas I am interested in the space that like is somewhere between that experimentalism and conventional narrative form that's playing with or experimenting with narrative form in a way that the pieces are all familiar, but it's like a rearrangement, so it's something not quite it's familiar and unfamiliar at the same time, I guess, is the space that I wanted the film to be in. So if that makes it experimental, then it was really important for me that it succeeded in those experiments. But I guess I don't always have the best grasp of that word, just because I know that it's so closely linked to a particular kind of formalist filmmaking.
Yep, definitely. No, I agree there completely. Now, a lot of young filmmakers listen to this show. What was the biggest difference that you noticed going from making short films to making this film as a feature?
There was a long break, and it wasn't one I intended to have. And I think a lot of people have a short film done and see that it's going to be a mountain to climb with a feature and just think, I'll make another short, which is totally a valid strategy. But I felt like with the short I did make that I'd done everything that I could with, or at least the ideas that I was having at the time. I just felt like I'd expressed them with that short, and was going to be maybe going over some of the same territory if I was to make another short. So I was also wary of the trap of how hard it is to make a film, no matter what kind of film it is. If it's a short or a feature. Not to say that they're comparable. The features, obviously it does take up so much more, but a short too can be really, you can spend a year or two making a short, and I just really wanted to move on into the next stage of filmmaking. And there was a bit of just bloody-mindedness, I think, about that. And looking back, if I had known it was going to be 9 years or something between, 8 years between the short and the feature, maybe I would have questioned some of my own assumptions a bit more about, just getting on with it. But, it's hard no matter what. But I think the short just did give me the confidence to, just in general, that like some of the themes I wanted to explore and some of the formal the aspects of like formal play that I was interested in, I felt they worked in the short, and that did give me confidence to go ahead with the feature. But in terms of just kind of smashing forward against obstacles to go and make a feature, it's not something I would say don't do, but it's a crazy amount of work with the feature, and the funding wasn't easy. I don't have any regrets, but I also wouldn't say it was the right thing to do, because I think there can be so many different approaches that work, whether it's going and working in the film industry for a while or going into TV. Not that I want to do that myself, but I just think there's so many different ways you can go after making a short and moving towards a feature. None of them easy, unfortunately, in Australia.
No, definitely not. Well, James, what you've ended up with here is a fantastic film. So to finish up, what would you like to say to everybody out there before they sit down to watch Friends and Strangers?
I would just like everyone to enjoy the film. You know, I feel like films should be enjoyed, and as much as I love writing about films, or listening to filmmakers speak, it's nothing like the experience of just watching a film. And I did want to make a film that was funny and that would be delightful in some small way. So I hope the film is thought provoking and all these other things, but I just hope people go into it with an open mind and have some laughs.
Definitely. Well, James, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today. It's been an absolute honour having you on the show, and we can't wait to see what you do with your next film as well.